My name is Hazel, and I've spent the last 3 years existing in a world that wasn't built for me. Shifters, Lycans, alphas, they run everything in this city. The hierarchy is bone deep, instinctual, carved into their very DNA. And me? I'm human. That means I'm a curiosity, a delicate thing that needs protecting, a fragile acquisition to be guarded. At least, that's what they think. Tonight is the Grand Lycan Gala, and tonight, I'm going to make a choice that will echo through every pack in this region. The Lycan King, Henry, has been watching me. Not in the romantic sense people whisper about. He's been assessing me, cataloging me, claiming me without ever saying the words out loud. His presence alone bends the air around him. He's used to obedience, used to getting exactly what he wants, exactly when he wants it. But I'm not a prize to be claimed. I'm not a symbol of his status or a confirmation of his power. Tonight, I'm going to prove it. The ballroom is a study in controlled power. Thousands of shifters fill the space. High-ranking alphas in tailored black, their companions draped in silks that cost more than my rent. Omegas moving with practiced grace through the crowd. Low-ranking pack members lining the walls in respectful silence. The chandeliers overhead are massive, dripping crystal, casting everything in amber light that makes the room feel like it's underwater. The scent hits me before I even cross the threshold. It's layers, expensive cologne, fresh rain, the musk of 100 alphas in close proximity. Something wild underneath it all that makes my hindbrain scream warnings I've learned to ignore. Kes appears at my elbow, her dark eyes wide. She's a low-ranking shifter, which means she fits seamlessly into this world while still being invisible enough to hear everything. That's why she's my best friend. "You look like you're about to commit treason," she whispers, her hand light on my arm. I'm wearing a dress that costs more than I should have spent. Deep crimson, floor length, with a slit that goes high enough to make a statement. My hair is down, loose, untamed. No submission in my posture, no softness in my angle. I look like someone who belongs here by her own choice, not by invitation. Not treason, I tell her, just recalibration. The ballroom opens up before us and heads turn. It's not because I'm stunning. Plenty of women here are more objectively beautiful. It's because I'm human, and I'm walking through their world like I own the space. That's when I feel it. The temperature shift is immediate. The air doesn't just change, it thickens, grows heavy. It's the same sensation you get before lightning strikes, that peculiar pressure that makes your teeth ache and your skin tingle. Conversations continue, but they're quieter now, forced. Henry is here. I don't look for him yet. That would be too obvious. Instead, I let Cass guide me toward the main floor, toward the orchestra pit, where live music swells through the room. The band is playing something classical, something that sounds like yearning. That's when I see Theodore. He's human too, which is unusual. A diplomat, high-ranking enough to warrant an invitation to this particular event. He's conventionally handsome, sharp jawline, well-groomed, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. He's charming in the way humans usually are. He smiles, he makes eye contact, he asks questions and actually listens to the answers. He's also completely, utterly harmless. When he approaches, and of course he approaches because I'm the only other human in a room full of predators, he does it with the confidence of someone who doesn't understand the power dynamics at play. "May I have the next dance?" he asks, extending his hand. It's such a simple, normal gesture. The kind of thing that happens at human galas and formal events all the time. The kind of thing that's about to become a declaration of war. I take his hand. Behind us, I feel the temperature drop another 10 degrees. 3 years ago, I didn't know what it meant to exist in a world where your heartbeat could betray you, where a single glance from someone could make your body commit treason. I was working as a structural engineer back then, contracted to assess a series of old warehouses the shifter clans wanted to renovate. It was supposed to be straightforward work. Get in, evaluate the buildings, file my report, collect my check. The clans weren't supposed to care about the human woman poking around their property. That's when I met him. He wasn't wearing a crown then, though the authorities still radiated off him like heat off summer asphalt. He was just walking through the warehouse district, and I happened to be there, taking measurements, my attention on the failing support beam above my head, instead of on the man who'd stepped into my peripheral vision. Henry didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. The air just shifted, became heavier. The way prey animals know when a predator is close, my body knew. Every nerve ending screamed at me to submit, to look down, to make myself smaller. Instead, I looked directly at him. "You're in my way," I said flatly, not lowering my eyes. He'd stared at me for a moment that felt like forever, and in that moment, I could see him recalibrating what I was. Not a threat, not really, but also not willing to play by the rules that governed every other human in his proximity. His eyes were golden, the kind of amber that looked like it held actual fire, and they tracked me with the intensity of something predatory assessing prey. "You're human," he said. Not a question, an observation, as if he was still determining whether I was real. "Observant," I replied, turning back to my beam. My hands weren't steady, but I kept working. That should have been the end of it, but he came back the next day, and the day after. He'd stand in the shadows of the warehouse, watching me work, and we'd talk. Or rather, he'd ask questions, and I'd answer them. About structural integrity, about the calculations I was running, about why I'd chosen this career. He listened like my answers mattered, like I mattered. By the end of that contract, I was in love with him. It wasn't the slow, gentle kind of love you're supposed to fall into. It was the violent, all-consuming kind that leaves you gasping. The kind that made me forget every warning I'd ever heard about human-shifter relationships. The kind that made me believe, really believe, that the rules didn't apply to us. And for a brief, glorious moment, I thought he felt it too. But then the politics started. His father was dying. The clans were watching. There were protocols about succession, about strength, about what kind of mate an alpha king was supposed to have. A human woman, no matter how fearless, no matter how brilliant, was a liability, a weakness, a distraction. He chose duty over us. Or rather, he tried to. What I didn't understand until much later was that he'd never really let me go. He just caged that feeling, buried it under responsibility and pack hierarchy and the weight of a crown he didn't want. Now, as I take Theodore's hand and feel the temperature in the room plummet, I'm forcing him to face that cage, to feel what's trapped inside it. And we both know what's about to happen. Theodore's hand is warm in mine, steady, completely unaware that he's just made a choice that will reshape the entire room's geometry. He leads me toward the dance floor with the easy confidence of someone who doesn't know he's a pawn in a game played by predators. The orchestra shifts to something slower, a waltz. Of course it's a waltz. That's what you dance when you're trying to establish dominance with grace, when you're trying to prove you belong in a space by moving through it with purpose. We're halfway across the floor when I feel it. It's not a sound. It's not even really a movement, though there is that too, a subtle shift in the crowd, the way bodies instinctively part for something dangerous. It's a change in air pressure, in the electromagnetic charge of the room. It's every nerve ending in my body suddenly, violently aware that the apex predator has arrived. Henry stands in the doorway. He's not wearing a crown. He doesn't need one. The authority radiates off him in waves so palpable I can almost see the distortion in the air around his frame. He's dressed in black, a tailored suit that costs more than my car, and his shoulders are so broad that he seems to fill the entire entrance without moving. His jaw is carved sharp enough to cut glass, his eyes the color of molten amber, and there's a stillness to him that's infinitely more dangerous than movement. This is what Henry looks like when he's not holding back. This is what Henry looks like when he's decided something is his. He's looking directly at me, and the weight of that attention is physical. It's like standing too close to an open flame, like the moment before lightning strikes, like every cell in my body is suddenly aware that I've made a catastrophic miscalculation. His gaze tracks from Theodore's hand on my waist to my face, and I watch the moment recognition hits him. Not just recognition of me, but recognition of what I'm doing. I'm dancing with someone else. I'm choosing to ignore the summons that's been hanging between us all night. I'm making a public statement about my own agency in a room full of creatures who measure value in dominance and submission. The temperature doesn't just drop, it crashes. I can see other dancers falter, can see shifters in the crowd tense as if bracing for impact. The air tastes like copper and electricity, like the moment before a storm tears apart a city. Kes is somewhere behind me. I can feel her presence. And I know without looking that her eyes are wide, that she's whispering prayers to gods that might not listen. Theodore feels it too. His grip on my waist tightens slightly, and I can taste his fear on the air between us. He's suddenly aware that he's not at a normal gala anymore. He's stepped into something ancient and territorial and absolutely, catastrophically dangerous. "Hazel," Theodore whispers, his voice careful. "What did you do?" I don't answer. I can't answer. I'm too focused on Henry, on the way he's moving toward the dance floor with a predatory grace that makes every muscle in his body look like a coiled threat. His shoulders shift as he walks, that dense, terrifying musculature shifting beneath his jacket like tectonic plates. He's not running toward us, but he's not exactly walking either. He's coming. The crowd parts for him like water splitting around a stone. Henry's presence doesn't announce itself with aggression or display. It announces itself the way gravity announces itself, as an inescapable force that bends everything in its proximity toward a single point. Shifters instinctively lower their eyes as he passes. High-ranking alphas who'd been holding court moments before suddenly find urgent business elsewhere. It's not fear exactly, it's recognition. Acknowledgement of a hierarchy so absolute that resistance isn't even a concept worth entertaining. He reaches the edge of the dance floor, and I can feel the exact moment Theodore understands what's about to happen. "Hazel," Theodore starts, and there's a tremor in his voice now. Not cowardice exactly, just the clear-eyed recognition that he's about to lose something he was never supposed to have. "We should..." But Henry is already moving. He doesn't reach for Theodore. Instead, he reaches past him, his hand closing around Theodore's shoulder with a grip that makes the diplomat's breath catch. It's not violent, but it's absolute. It's the kind of grip that says, "You have 30 seconds to let her go before I decide how much of you I'm willing to tolerate in my presence." When Henry speaks, his voice is low, controlled. But underneath that control is something ancient and primal, something that predates language, something that every cell in Theodore's body recognizes as apex predator. My turn. Theodore releases me immediately. There's no heroism in it, no dramatic gesture of defiance. There's just the clear understanding that he's outmatched in every conceivable way. He steps backward, hands raised slightly in a gesture that's almost apologetic, and disappears into the crowd. And then it's just Henry and me. His hand settles on the small of my back, and the heat of it is almost unbearable. It radiates through the fabric of my dress like I'm standing too close to an open flame. His other hand takes mine with a gentleness that's somehow more dangerous than violence. It says he doesn't need to be rough because I've already surrendered the moment he touched me, whether I've admitted it to myself or not. The orchestra keeps playing, but I barely hear it over the sound of my own heartbeat. We're moving now, and he's leading with the kind of precision that suggests he's done this 1,000 times before, that he's memorized the exact pressure required to guide me through space without breaking me. His jaw is clenched so tightly I can see the muscle working there, see the effort it's taking him to maintain this facade of control. Up close, I can smell him, that intoxicating blend of spiced rum and cedarwood and something else, something uniquely Henry that bypasses my rational brain and goes straight for the primal parts. "Did you think ignoring my call was clever?" he asks, and his voice vibrates against my chest. We're close enough now that I can feel the heat radiating from his body, can feel the corded strength of his forearm beneath his jacket. I tilt my head up to meet his eyes, and they're burning. Actually burning. The amber is so bright it looks like there's actual fire behind those irises, like he's holding back something massive through sheer force of will. "I thought it was honest," I tell him, and my voice is steadier than my hands. Something flickers across his expression, surprise maybe, or recognition. His grip on my waist tightens fractionally, not enough to hurt, just enough to anchor me against him. "Honest," he repeats, as if testing the word. As if trying to understand how I could possibly believe that defying him was anything other than a catastrophic miscalculation. Around us, the ballroom has gone absolutely silent. You're mine, Hazel. The words don't come as a question or a request. They're a statement of fact, delivered with the absolute certainty of someone who's never had to negotiate for anything in his life. His hand presses slightly deeper into the small of my back, anchoring me against him, and I can feel the corded strength of his forearm through the thin fabric of my dress. The orchestra is still playing, but nobody's listening anymore. The entire ballroom has become a stage, and we're the only performance that matters. I can feel every eye in this room tracking our movement, every shifter calculating what this moment means for the hierarchy, for the balance of power. Henry's jaw is working, and I can see the effort it's taking him to maintain this facade of controlled dominance. His eyes are burning that impossible amber, and there's a tremor running through his frame that has nothing to do with the music. I know exactly what you are, he continues, and his voice has dropped so low I can barely hear it over the orchestra. But I feel it. It vibrates through my chest, settles into my bones like a promise or a threat or both. You're the only thing that makes sense anymore. My breath catches. I didn't expect vulnerability. Not here. Not in front of all these witnesses. Around us, shifters are shifting their weight, leaning closer, trying to get a better view of what's unfolding. This is the moment they'll talk about for years. The moment the Lycan King claims something human in front of half the governing body of the Eastern Pax. Then see me, I tell him, and I'm surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Not as a possession, as a person. Henry's grip doesn't loosen, but something changes in the way he's holding me. It's subtle. A shift in pressure, a change in the angle of his body. He's not trying to cage me anymore. He's trying to anchor himself against the force of what he's feeling. I do, he says. And there's something raw in those two words. Something that sounds like it cost him. I see you. I've always seen you. The dance continues, but it's not a dance anymore. It's a conversation written in movement and pressure and the overwhelming heat of two people in absolute proximity. My skin is tingling where he's touching me. My heartbeat is so loud, I'm certain everyone in this ballroom can hear it. The scent of him, spiced rum and cedarwood, and something else, something uniquely Henry, is making it hard to think clearly. Other couples have started dancing again, but it's performative. They're going through the motions while their attention remains on us. This is territorial. This is the moment Henry reminds every single shifter in this room exactly what he is and exactly what he's claiming. Stop fighting this, he whispers, and his forehead is nearly touching mine now. Stop fighting me. I'm not fighting you, I tell him, and it's the truth. I'm fighting the idea that I have to choose between you and myself. Something shifts in his expression, a crack in the certainty. His amber eyes flicker, becoming more human, more vulnerable. And in that moment, I understand that he's been as terrified as I have. That his possessiveness isn't about control. It's about fear. Fear that I'll leave. Fear that I'll choose wrong. Fear that he'll lose the only thing that's ever made him feel like something other than a king. The music swells around us, and we keep dancing. We keep dancing, but the world around us is changing. I can feel it in the way the other couples have stopped moving, in the way the shifters lining the walls have shifted their weight, in the way the air itself seems to be holding its breath. This isn't just a moment anymore. This is a reckoning. This is the instant where everything I've been building toward finally crystallizes into something undeniable. Henry's hand on my waist is a brand. His heartbeat against my chest is the only sound that matters. You came to this gala knowing I'd be here, he says, and there's no question in his voice. It's a statement of fact. You knew I'd be waiting for you. I did know. That's the thing that terrifies him, I think. Not that I defied him, but that I knew exactly what I was doing. That I walked into this ballroom fully aware of the power dynamics, the hierarchy, the absolute certainty that Henry would summon me. And I chose to ignore that summons anyway. I came to prove something, I tell him. To whom? His eyes are searching mine now, and there's genuine confusion there. Not anger. Not yet. Just a kind of bewildered pain that suggests he's trying to understand how I could possibly value anything more than the gravity of his attention. To yourself? To them? He gestures subtly toward the crowd with his chin, and I realize that every single shifter in this ballroom is now calculating what my defiance means for the stability of the pack hierarchy. If the Lycan King can't control his chosen one, what does that say about his authority? What does that say about the chain of command that keeps thousands of shifters in line? To you, I say, and I feel him go still. Actually still, the way prey animals go still when they sense something catastrophic is about to shift. I came to prove that I'm not something that can be claimed. I'm something that has to be chosen. The orchestra is still playing, but the music sounds wrong now, discordant, like they're aware that the fundamental rules of this dance have shifted. You don't understand what you're risking, Henry says, and there's a plea underneath the words, a genuine desperation that I've never heard from him before. My council will demand answers. The other packs will see weakness. They'll use you against me. I know, I tell him. And you don't care? I care, I say, and I let him feel the truth of it. But I care more about you seeing me as a person than I care about your convenience. Something breaks in his expression. It's subtle, just a tightening around his eyes, a barely perceptible relaxation in his jaw. But it's undeniable. He's struggling with something massive, something that's warring with every instinct he has as an alpha king. The dance ends, but neither of us moves. We're standing in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by hundreds of shifters, and he's looking at me like I'm the only thing that's real. If you're going to defy me, he says slowly, then I need you to understand what comes next. This isn't some romantic gesture. This is a declaration, and there will be consequences. I nod, because I do understand. I've always understood. Then let's face them together, I tell him. Theodore stands at the edge of the ballroom, glass of champagne in hand, and watches what he's just set in motion. He's not stupid. That's the thing people always misjudge about him. They see the tailored suit, the diplomatic credentials, the carefully maintained charm, and they assume he's naive. They think he didn't understand the power dynamics at play when he approached Hazel at the bar 10 minutes ago. They think he didn't notice the way the Lycan King's attention locked onto her the moment she walked through the entrance, the way the air itself seemed to bend toward her, like gravity finding its center. He noticed. He understood exactly what he was asking for when he extended his hand. Hazel had been standing alone at the bar, which was its own kind of statement. Most humans wouldn't dream of standing anywhere unescorted in a room full of predators. But Hazel had been looking at the orchestra with the expression of someone genuinely interested in the music, unconcerned with the weight of attention bearing down on her from across the ballroom. That's when Theodore had made his choice. He'd known who she was, obviously. Everyone in diplomatic circles knew about the human woman who'd somehow infiltrated the shifter world. The structural engineer who'd caught the eye of the Lycan King and then mysteriously disappeared from the public sphere 3 years ago. The ghost story that shifters whispered about in dark corners. The woman who'd almost broken the king before he'd regained control of his own hierarchy. And he'd known, with absolute certainty, that approaching her was going to be catastrophic. But Theodore had spent 15 years in diplomatic service, and there was something he'd learned. Sometimes, the only way to understand a power structure is to test its boundaries. Sometimes, you have to see what happens when you push against the edges to understand where the actual lines are drawn. So he'd walked up to her. He'd seen the moment she recognized what he was asking, not just for a dance, but for a public statement, a visible challenge to the Lycan King's claim. And she'd said yes. Now, as he watches Henry move across the dance floor with Hazel locked against him like she's the only thing preventing him from shattering, Theodore allows himself a small smile. It's not a smile of triumph. It's a smile of respect. Hazel had understood exactly what he was doing, using her to test the boundaries of Henry's control. And she'd done it anyway. She'd made the conscious choice to be a pawn in a game played by predators, because she understood that sometimes being a pawn is the only way to move the pieces at all. The Lycan King is vibrating with barely contained fury, but it's not directed at Theodore anymore. Henry had dismissed him the moment Hazel's hand was in his, had decided that Theodore was beneath retaliation. The diplomat was useful. He'd served his purpose by providing the catalyst, the moment of defiance that forced Henry to acknowledge what he was feeling. Kess appears beside Theodore, her dark eyes tracking the scene on the dance floor. "That was incredibly stupid," she says, and there's no judgment in her voice, just acknowledgement. That was incredibly necessary, Theodore corrects. She nods, because she understands. They both understand. Hazel needs Henry to see her as more than a prize or a possession or a symbol of status. And sometimes the only way to force that kind of recognition is to remind a king that his authority isn't absolute, that there are people willing to risk everything for the principle that choice, not dominance, should determine the shape of the world. Theodore raises his glass toward the dance floor in a silent toast. To dangerous women and the men foolish enough to love them. The orchestra shifts the piece, and it's slower now, deeper. The kind of music that makes you feel the weight of every heartbeat, every breath, every point of contact between two bodies that shouldn't work, but somehow do. Henry's hand on my back presses slightly, a subtle command that's not a command at all. It's an invitation to lean into him, to stop fighting the gravity that's been pulling at me since I walked through the doors of this ballroom. My palm is against his chest, and I can feel his heartbeat, fast, aggressive, possessive. It's racing like he's been running, like every cell in his body is burning with the effort of maintaining this facade of controlled dominance. We're not really dancing anymore. Dancing implies movement, implies steps and turns, and the kind of choreography that suggests grace. This is something else. This is two people finding their rhythm in each other, adjusting to the weight and heat and undeniable presence of being this close. My dress moves around us like water, and his suit is a steady dark anchor, and somewhere in the space between our bodies is everything that's been unsaid for 3 years. "You smell like defiance," he whispers into my hair, and there's something almost like amusement in his voice. Almost. Underneath it is something deeper, something that sounds like need. I can feel every muscle in his frame, the corded strength of his shoulders, the hard planes of his chest, the way his body has positioned itself to shield me from the weight of the ballroom's attention. He's not just holding me anymore. He's protecting me. There's a difference, and we both feel it. "You smell like lightning," I tell him. And it's true. There's an ozone-sharp scent underneath the cedarwood, something electric and dangerous that suggests he's closer to shifting than he usually allows himself to be. His control is fragmenting, and I'm both terrified and exhilarated by the knowledge that I'm the cause. The other dancers have created a buffer around us without being asked. They formed a perimeter, a visible acknowledgement that whatever this is, it's not for public consumption. We're in the middle of a crowded ballroom, but we might as well be alone. Everyone can see us, but no one's willing to witness the specifics of what's happening between Henry and me. His jaw is pressed against my temple now, and I can feel him breathing, really breathing, like he's been holding his breath and has finally decided it's safe enough to let it out. One of his hands has moved from my waist to the small of my back, fingers splayed wide, taking up more space, claiming more territory. 3 years, he says, and his voice is rough. Rough in a way I've never heard before. 3 years of watching you from a distance. 3 years of knowing exactly where you were, exactly what you were doing, exactly who you were with. I should find it creepy. The rational part of my brain knows that admitting to that kind of surveillance is supposed to be disturbing. But my body knows the truth that my mind tries to deny. He wasn't stalking me out of obsession. He was protecting me. He was keeping me close the only way he could, given the chains of duty and responsibility that bound him to everything except me. Then why didn't you come for me, I ask, and the question comes out smaller than I intended, more vulnerable. Henry's grip on my back tightens, and for a moment, I think he's not going to answer. But then he leans down, his forehead resting against mine, and I can feel the intensity of what he's about to say before the words even form. "Because I was terrified," he tells me, "that you'd choose yourself over me. And you were right to do it." The moment the words leave his mouth, the entire ballroom stops breathing. It's not a collective gasp or a dramatic intake of air. It's worse than that. It's absolute, suffocating silence. The orchestra continues playing because they don't understand yet that the world has just shifted on its axis. But every human and shifter in this room has gone absolutely, completely still. The Lycan King just admitted fear. I can feel the weight of what he said settling over the crowd like ash. Around us, shifters are processing the impossibility of it. Kings don't admit fear. alphas don't confess vulnerability. The entire hierarchy that keeps thousands of creatures in line is built on the bedrock principle that strength is absolute, that control is unshakable, that the creatures at the top of the pyramid are somehow fundamentally different from those below them. And Henry just shattered that illusion in front of witnesses. His forehead is still pressed against mine, and I can feel the tremor running through his entire frame. It's not weakness. It's the physical manifestation of control fragmenting. His hand on my back is shaking, actually shaking, and I realize with a shock of clarity that he's more vulnerable right now than he's ever been in front of his own people. Kes has her hand over her mouth. Theodore is watching with the expression of someone who's just understood the true cost of what he set in motion. The council members lining the edge of the ballroom are leaning toward each other, whispering urgently, trying to calculate what this admission means for the stability of the pack hierarchy. But Henry doesn't seem to care anymore. You were always the strongest one, he continues, his voice low enough that only I can hear, though the ballroom is so silent that his words might as well be broadcast through speakers. I realized that about 3 weeks after you walked away. You had the courage to choose yourself. I didn't have the courage to choose you. I want to tell him that's not true. I want to rewrite history in a way that doesn't leave either of us bleeding. But he continues before I can speak, and his voice drops even lower. So I watched you instead, he says. I kept you safe from a distance. I made sure nothing in my world could touch you without consequence. And I told myself that was enough. That proximity without claim was some kind of noble sacrifice. His eyes open, and they're still burning that impossible amber, but there's something different in them now, something raw and exposed that looks dangerously close to tears. An alpha doesn't cry, not in public, not in front of his council and his pack and the delicate alliance of human diplomats who are watching to see if shifter leadership is stable enough to negotiate with. But Henry looks like he's about to shatter, and he doesn't seem to care who sees it. I was lying to myself, he whispers. I was protecting myself, and you were never supposed to come back here and force me to admit it. Around us, the silence has become something physical, something that has weight and texture and the capacity to suffocate. The orchestra has actually stopped playing now, the musicians clearly understanding that continuing would be obscene. I reach up with my free hand and touch his face, my palm against the sharp angle of his jaw. His eyes close at the contact, and I feel him breathe, really breathe, like he's been drowning, and I'm the first person to throw him a line. Then stop lying, I tell him softly. Stop hiding. Let them see you. He opens his eyes and looks directly at me, and in that gaze is every terrified thing he's been holding back for 3 years. If I do that, he says, I might never let you go again. I know, I tell him. And that scares you? Terrifies me, I admit, but not enough to walk away. Something breaks in Henry's expression. It's not gentle. It's not the kind of softening that comes with acceptance. It's the moment when a king stops trying to maintain the fiction that he's in control of his own emotions. He pulls back just far enough to look at me, and the amber in his eyes is absolutely blinding now. This is what an alpha looks like when he's stopped pretending to be human. This is what happens when centuries of lineage and power and genetic predisposition decides it's done with restraint. You're going to regret those words, he says, and his voice is low, dangerous. The kind of tone that makes every nerve ending in my body sit up and take notice. You're going to beg me to stop, and I'm not going to listen. But he's not talking about violence. We both know what he's talking about. The kind of claiming that happens in the space between bodies, the weight of his attention, the suffocating intensity of being the sole focus of a creature whose entire biological imperative is possession and protection and control. His hand moves from my back to my jaw, tilting my face up with a gentleness that contradicts the absolute certainty in his grip. His thumb traces my cheekbone, and the sensation sends electricity down my spine. One finger, one touch. And I'm suddenly aware that every cell in my body is vibrating at exactly his frequency. You danced with another man, he says, and there's something almost like wonder in his voice, like he's still trying to process that I had the audacity to defy him. In front of everyone, in front of my entire council. I did, I confirm, because there's no point in denying it. Do you understand what that means? His other hand is on my waist now, pulling me closer until there's no space between us. No room for anything but the heat radiating from his body and the intoxicating scent of him. Spiced rum and cedarwood and something electric. Do you understand that I'm going to spend every moment from now until the end of time reminding you that you belong to me? The possessiveness in those words should terrify me. Instead, it makes my heartbeat accelerate, makes my skin prickle with something that feels dangerously close to anticipation. Around us, the ballroom has begun to move again, but it's tentative, cautious, like everyone's trying to decide if it's safe to breathe in a room where the king is vibrating with barely contained intensity. I'm not a possession, I tell him, though my voice wavers slightly. No, he agrees, and his forehead is against mine now. You're so much worse than that. You're necessary. You're the one thing that makes me want to be better than what I am, and that makes you infinitely more dangerous. His lips are almost touching mine now, and I can taste the electricity in the space between us. One kiss would shatter whatever's left of the pretense that I'm still in control of this situation. One kiss would be a public declaration that would echo through every pack in the region. When we leave this ballroom, he says, his voice a rough whisper, you're going to understand exactly what it means to have my full attention. Not in public, not for an audience. Just you and me, and the complete, devastating knowledge that you've destroyed any ability I have to pretend I'm anything other than absolutely, irrevocably yours. And then he does it. He kisses me, and the entire room goes up in flames. The kiss breaks and the ballroom erupts. Not in chaos, nothing so crude as that. It's worse. It's the sound of a hierarchy recalibrating in real time. Shifters whispering urgently to their companions. Council members straightening their posture as if bracing for impact. The orchestra finally understanding that they should stop playing, that continuing would be obscene. Henry pulls away from me, slowly, deliberately, as if he's savoring the last moment of contact before the world reasserts itself. His forehead stays pressed against mine for another breath, and I can feel him gathering the pieces of himself back together, rebuilding the facade of control that he just shattered in front of 500 witnesses. When he steps back, his hand stays linked with mine. It's not possessive, it's an anchor. We're leaving, he says, not to me, but to the room. His voice carries the weight of absolute authority, the kind of tone that doesn't invite argument. Now. Nobody moves to stop us. They wouldn't dare. He leads me through the crowd, and the shifters part like we're walking through water. I catch glimpses of faces as we pass. Shock, calculation, fear, respect. Kes gives me a look that says, I'll be explaining this for weeks. Theodore actually nods, a gesture that feels like acknowledgement of a game well played. But I don't have time to process any of it. Henry guides me through a corridor I didn't even know existed, through paneled doorways that look like they're part of the ballroom's walls, but clearly aren't. The scent of the gala fades, replaced by something cooler. Rain and stone, and the subtle musk of his personal spaces. We end up in what looks like a private study. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlook the grounds below, the gardens lit by soft, ambient lighting. A fire is burning in the fireplace, casting everything in amber and shadow. It feels like the entire room is breathing. Henry releases my hand, only to guide me to the leather sofa in front of the fire. He sits, then pulls me down beside him, positioning me so my back is against his chest, his arms wrapped around me from behind. It's the posture of someone who's terrified I'm going to disappear if he doesn't maintain physical contact. Are you okay? I ask, because he's shaking, actually trembling against me. And it takes me a moment to understand that this powerful creature, whose entire identity is built on control, is unraveling. No, he says, and his voice is raw, honest. I'm not okay. I haven't been okay since you walked away 3 years ago. I turn slightly in his arms to look at him, and the vulnerability in his expression is staggering. This is what kings don't show. This is what alphas spend their entire lives learning to hide. Henry, I start, but he cuts me off. Let me say this, he whispers. Let me say all of it before I lose the courage. I go still. I love you, he continues, his amber eyes searching mine in the firelight. Not as a king loves a prize, not as an alpha loves an omega. I love you as a man loves the woman who saw him at his most broken and decided to stay anyway. The fire crackles between us and the windows, and the world outside ceases to exist. I've always loved you, he says, even when I was too afraid to admit it. Theodore's apartment overlooks the city in a way that suggests money and access, high enough to see everything, far enough away to maintain plausible deniability about what you've witnessed. He stands at the window now, drink in hand, watching the gala lights fade in the distance as the evening deteriorates into something messier than anyone anticipated. His phone buzzes. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Messages from his contacts in the diplomatic corps, each one carrying the same essential information. The Lycan King just declared himself for a human woman in front of his entire council. The implications are still cascading outward, rippling through networks that have spent centuries operating under the assumption that such things simply don't happen. Theodore smiles into his whiskey. People think diplomacy is about finding compromise. They think it's about negotiation and careful language, and the kind of measured responses that allow everyone to save face. They're wrong. Diplomacy is about understanding what someone needs so badly that they'll abandon their principles to get it. It's about leverage. And tonight, Theodore just provided Henry with the perfect leverage to do what he's apparently wanted to do for 3 years, but didn't have the courage to attempt alone. His phone buzzes again. This time, it's a secure line, encrypted, the kind of communication that pretends it never happened. He knows who it is before he answers. That was reckless, Henry's voice comes through, and there's something almost like amusement underneath the controlled tone. Something that suggests the king understands exactly what Theodore was doing and respects it. That was necessary, Theodore corrects, echoing the conversation he'd had with Kess on the periphery of the ballroom. She needed to see that she had options. You needed to be forced to fight for her instead of just claiming her. There's a pause, long enough that Theodore wonders if he's miscalculated, long enough that he considers the possibility that he's just made an enemy of the most powerful creature on the continent. How long have you known? Henry asks. About what? That she was the reason you're barely functional as a leader? About 3 weeks after you stopped coming to the diplomatic summits. Theodore takes another drink. The withdrawal symptoms were obvious if you knew what to look for. Another pause. What do you want? It's the question Theodore has been waiting for. The question that means Henry's finally ready to acknowledge that this wasn't random, that Theodore didn't just decide on impulse to dance with the most protected human in the shifter world. The same thing you want, Theodore says, for things to change. He can hear Henry's breathing on the other end of the line, controlled, measured, the sound of someone trying to process information that contradicts everything his instincts are screaming. The human world is going to shift, Theodore continues. Humans and shifters coexisting openly. It's inevitable. The only question is whether it happens violently or whether we build the framework for it now. You and Hazel could be that framework. You're suggesting I use her for political purposes? I'm suggesting that using her would be the one thing she'd never forgive, Theodore says. What I'm actually suggesting is that you stop being terrified of what happens when she chooses you freely. Because she will. She already has. Henry's breathing is heavier now, rawer. If you ever touch her again, Henry starts. I won't, Theodore interrupts. I was never trying to take her. I was trying to make you worthy of her. There's a difference. The line goes silent, then disconnects. Theodore sets down his phone and returns to the window, watching the city lights blur together in the darkness. He thinks about the game pieces he just moved, about the consequences that will ripple outward from this night, about the woman who had the courage to defy a king, and the king who finally had the courage to admit he needed her. It's beautiful, really, the way power works when you understand that sometimes destruction is the only path to creation. The silence between us is absolute, complete. The kind of silence that exists only in the spaces between heartbeats, in the moments when the world holds its breath, waiting for someone to break first. Henry's hands tighten around my waist, and I can feel the exact moment he decides that words aren't going to be enough. That the vulnerability he's just exposed requires more than confession. It requires proof. He shifts me slightly, turning my body so I'm facing him fully, so there's no distance between us except the space our breath occupies. His hand moves from my waist to my jaw, tilting my face up with a deliberation that suggests he's savoring the anticipation. His thumb traces my cheekbone, and the sensation is so electric that I have to remind myself to breathe. "You're going to stay," he says, and it's not a question. It's not even really a demand. It's a statement of fact delivered with the absolute certainty of someone who spent 3 years preparing for this moment. "You're going to stay because I'm going to make you understand exactly what you mean to me." My heart is racing so fast, I'm certain he can feel it against his chest. The fire crackles in the background, casting everything in shades of amber and shadow. The windows behind us reflect our silhouettes back at ourselves. Two people locked in a gravity so intense it seems to bend the space around them. "Henry," I start, but his mouth is already moving closer to mine, and the words dissolve into something that might be his name or might just be the sound of surrender. 3 years, he whispers against my lips. 3 years of watching you move through the world, knowing exactly where you were, exactly who you were with, and not being able to touch you. Do you understand what that cost me? His hands are moving now, mapping the terrain of my shoulders, my spine, the curve of my waist. It's not aggressive, it's reverent. It's the way someone touches something they've been terrified to break, and the sensation is almost unbearable. Every nerve ending in my body is suddenly, violently aware that this creature who commands thousands is trembling against me. "I watched you build your life," he continues, his voice rough against my neck now. "I watched you make choices without me, and it was the most painful thing I've ever endured, because I wanted to be the one you chose, but I was too terrified to ask." His lips find the space where my neck meets my shoulder, and the sensation sends electricity down my spine. He's not kissing me exactly. He's breathing me in, like he's trying to memorize the scent of me, the texture of my skin, the evidence that I'm real and present and not going to disappear. "You came back," he whispers against my skin. "You walked into that ballroom, and you came back to me." His forehead is pressed against mine now, and we're suspended in this moment where nothing else exists. Not the gala, not the council, not the weight of his crown or the burden of his title. Just two people in the firelight, learning each other's gravity. I'm terrified, I admit, and my voice is barely a whisper. Of how much I need you, of what happens if I let you matter this much. His hand moves to the back of my neck, fingers splaying through my hair, and he pulls me closer until there's absolutely no space between us. "Then be terrified with me," he says, "because I've been terrified alone, and it's unbearable." The fire crackles, the night deepens, and somewhere in the darkness, two people finally stop running. His mouth finds mine, and the kiss is nothing like the one in the ballroom. That kiss was a declaration, public, possessive, a statement of claim delivered in front of witnesses. This kiss is different. This is what happens when a king stops performing and starts feeling. His hand is at the back of my neck, fingers splayed through my hair, anchoring me against him with a gentleness that contradicts the absolute intensity of his mouth. He's tasting me like he's trying to memorize every detail, every texture, every small noise I make as his lips move against mine. I can taste the whiskey on his tongue, can feel the corded strength of his shoulders beneath my hands, can hear the ragged quality of his breathing as he pulls me closer, as if proximity isn't quite enough, as if there's some impossible distance he's trying to close by will alone. When he breaks the kiss, his forehead stays pressed against mine, and I can feel him shaking, actually trembling like he's expended every ounce of control he possesses in that single moment of contact. 3 years, he whispers, and his voice is rough, raw. It's the voice of someone who's been holding something back so intensely that releasing even a fraction of it feels catastrophic. Do you understand what I'm about to do to you? My heart is racing so fast, I think I might actually break. His hand moves from my neck to my jaw, tilting my face to the side. and his lips find the sensitive space just below my ear. The sensation is electric, devastating. Every nerve ending in my body is suddenly screaming in awareness of his proximity, his heat, the absolutely undeniable fact that this creature has decided I'm his focus. "Henry," I start, but he's already moving, already shifting me onto the sofa so I'm beneath him, the weight of his body a brand against every inch of my skin. "I'm going to remind you," he continues against my neck, his voice vibrating against my skin, "exactly why you can't dance with anyone else, why you'll never want to." His hand traces down my spine, mapping each vertebra with deliberate precision. It's not rough, it's not crude. It's reverent in a way that's somehow more intense than violence. He's worshiping me the way an alpha worships something he's claimed, with absolute possessiveness, with the kind of intensity that suggests he'd destroy anyone who tried to take this away from him. His amber eyes are burning in the firelight, and there's something in that gaze that makes my breath catch. It's not just desire, it's desperation. It's the look of someone who's been surviving on scraps of proximity and is finally being given the full meal. "Now," he says, and his voice drops even lower. "I get to spend every moment reminding you that this," he presses his forehead against mine, "this is what you're mine for. Not because I'm a king, not because of hierarchy or claim or biology, but because you chose it. You chose me." His lips find mine again, and this kiss is deeper, more consuming. It's the kiss of someone who's finally stopped pretending that proximity is enough, who's decided that he's going to teach my entire body exactly what it means to be the sole focus of a creature whose entire biological imperative is possession and protection. The fire crackles beside us, the night deepens around us, and in the privacy of this room, far from witnesses and council members and the weight of his crown, Henry finally stops being a king. He just becomes mine. The ballroom feels different when we return. It's the same space, same orchestra, same ambient lighting, same crowd of shifters and diplomats positioned along the walls like they've been holding their collective breath, waiting for us to emerge. But the air itself has shifted. The pressure has changed. Every single person in this room knows exactly what we were doing in that study, and they're all pretending not to care, while simultaneously unable to look away. Henry's hand hasn't released mine since we left the study. It's a constant anchor, a physical reminder that whatever happened between us in that private room didn't end when we walked back through the doorway. If anything, it's intensified. His grip isn't controlling, it's reassurance. It's the hand of someone who's been terrified I might disappear. The orchestra shifts as we approach the dance floor, and I realize the conductor has been waiting for us. Literally waiting. They begin a new piece, something slower than before, something that feels deliberately chosen to emphasize the weight of what's about to happen. Henry pulls me into the center of the ballroom, and the crowd creates space without being asked. It's automatic, instinctive, the way prey animals part for the predator. His hand settles on my waist, but it's different now. Before, it was a claim. Now, it's something closer to worship. His fingers spread wide across the small of my back, and I can feel the barely contained power in that touch. The absolute knowledge that he could crush me, and is choosing instead to hold me like I'm the most fragile thing he's ever touched. "Everyone's watching," I whisper, because they are. Every eye in this ballroom is tracking the movement of his hand against my spine, cataloging the way he's angled his body to shield me from the crowd, noting the intensity with which he's looking at me like I'm the only thing that exists. "Let them," he says, and there's something almost relaxed in his voice now. The tension has shifted from desperate to certain. Let them understand exactly what they're witnessing. We move together, and it's nothing like the dances before. This isn't dominance or possession or even defiance. This is synchronicity. His body knows mine, adjusts to mine, moves in perfect counterpoint to my movements. I can feel every muscle in his frame, every controlled breath, every moment of restraint he's learned over centuries of being something more than human. His forehead lowers until it's almost touching mine, and I catch the scent of him, spiced rum and cedarwood and something else. Something that's just Henry, raw, unguarded, completely present. "You're mine now," he whispers, but there's no edge to it, no threat, Just acknowledgement of something that feels inevitable, something that stopped being a question the moment I touched him in that study. I always was, I tell him. His grip tightens fractionally, and I feel him absorb the weight of those words. Around us, the ballroom has gone quiet again, but it's a different silence. Not the silence of tension waiting to break, the silence of witnesses to something sacred. The orchestra continues playing. Henry continues moving me through this dance with the precision of someone who's waited 3 years to get this exactly right. And I continue to let myself fall deeper into the gravity of him. Deeper into the certainty that whatever comes next, I'm going to face it with his hand anchored to the small of my back and his eyes fixed entirely on mine. The music shifts again, but Henry's hold on me doesn't soften. If anything, it intensifies. There's something different in the way he's holding me now. Something that feels less like dominance and more like a man trying to contain something catastrophic within the bounds of his own body. You need to understand something, he says, his voice low enough that only I can hear it over the orchestra. Being with me isn't romantic. It's not some fairy tale where you get to set the terms and I gracefully accept them. The words should sting. Instead, they make my heartbeat accelerate. I know, I tell him, and I mean it. I've always known exactly what Henry is. Not a king pretending to be human. A predator who's learned to speak the language of civilization, but never stopped being a creature of absolute, undeniable want. Do you? His hand moves from my back to my jaw, tilting my face up so he can look directly into my eyes. The amber in his gaze is burning brighter now. Because what I'm about to ask of you, what I'm about to demand, it's going to test every boundary you think you have. Around us, the ballroom has gone absolutely still. The other dancers have stopped moving. The crowd lining the walls has stopped pretending not to watch. We're at the epicenter of something massive, something that feels like it's about to reshape the fundamental hierarchy of this entire world. Then be honest with me, I say, and I feel him pause. No more games, no more pretense. Just tell me what you actually want. His jaw clenches, and I can see him struggling with something massive. The weight of his crown, the burden of his title, the absolute knowledge that if he admits what he actually wants, there's no going back. No maintaining the careful fiction that he's a king before he's a man. I want you to stay, he finally says, and his voice is rough, desperate. Not as a mate, not as some biological imperative. I want you to stay because you choose to, every single day, even when it would be easier to leave. I reach up and touch his face, my palm against the sharp angle of his jaw. His eyes close at the contact. That's not a demand, I tell him quietly. That's a choice, and I'm already making it. When he opens his eyes again, there's something different in them, something that looks dangerously close to relief. He pulls me closer, and the dance becomes something else entirely. It's no longer about the crowd or the spectacle or the politics of it all. It's just two people moving together, learning the rhythm of each other's bodies, understanding that this thing between us isn't about dominance or possession. It's about surrender. Both of us. Surrendering the need to maintain control. Both of us. Admitting that we're terrified. Both of us. Choosing anyway. His forehead lowers to mine, and his breathing is ragged against my skin. Around us, the ballroom seems to fade away. The orchestra, the crowd, the weight of expectation and tradition and hierarchy. None of it matters anymore. There's only Henry. Only the warmth of his body. Only the absolute certainty that I've just made the most important choice of my life, and I'd make it again in a heartbeat. You're going to be mine, he whispers, but there's no edge to it anymore. Just acknowledgement. Just the truth we've both been dancing around since the moment I walked into this ballroom. I'm already yours, I tell him. And he finally stops fighting. The dance ends, but the contact doesn't. Henry guides me away from the ballroom with the same deliberate certainty he's used all night. His hand locked around mine, his body positioned so close that I can feel the heat radiating from him. We don't go back to the study. Instead, he leads me through corridors I didn't know existed, up staircases hidden behind paneled walls, until we're in a section of the estate that feels completely removed from the gala below. The doors to his private chambers are heavy oak, carved with symbols I don't recognize. Territorial markers, probably. Claims made in ancient languages by kings long dead. He pushes them open with his free hand, and the space beyond is exactly what I expected. All dark leather and amber lighting, and the kind of careful minimalism that only comes from absolute control. He closes the doors behind us, and the sound of the lock engaging feels like a period at the end of a sentence. Like we've moved from chapter to chapter, and there's no going back to the previous one. "This is the part where I need you to understand something," he says, and his voice has shifted again. It's lower now, rougher. It's the voice of someone who's finally stopped performing and started being. His hand releases mine, only to settle on the small of my back, fingers splayed wide, covering so much surface area that it feels like he's trying to anchor me to him through sheer surface contact. "I'm listening," I tell him, because I am. Completely. Absolutely. He guides me deeper into the chamber, and I'm suddenly aware of every detail. The scent of him here is overwhelming. Cedarwood and spiced rum mixed with something that's just Henry. The space is warm, but not uncomfortably so. The lighting is carefully calibrated to emphasize certain features. The sharp line of his jaw, the corded strength of his shoulders, the absolute certainty in his amber eyes. "I've spent 3 years," he says, positioning me in front of the fireplace, "learning to hold back, learning to maintain control, learning to accept that touching you was something I couldn't have." His hands move to my shoulders, and the weight of them is devastating. Not heavy in a physical sense. Henry's careful about how much of his actual strength he applies, but heavy in the way it feels to be the sole focus of something this powerful. "But I'm done," he continues, his voice dropping lower. "I'm done pretending that proximity is enough. I'm done accepting boundaries that don't exist anymore." He turns me to face him, and his forehead lowers until it's almost touching mine. I can feel his breathing, fast, controlled, barely restrained. "So here's what's going to happen," he says, and there's no question in his voice, no room for negotiation, just absolute certainty. "You're going to stay in this room. You're going to let me remind you exactly what it means to be mine. And you're going to understand, on a level so fundamental that it rewires the way your brain processes reality, that no one else gets to touch you. No one else gets to dance with you. No one else gets to know you the way I do." His hand moves from my back to my jaw, tilting my face up with a gentleness that contradicts the absolute possession in his words. "And you're going to let me," he whispers, "because you chose this. You chose me." The room feels smaller, the fire crackles louder, and in the space between his body and mine, everything that's been unsaid for 3 years finally finds its voice. The gardens behind the estate are cooler at this hour, the ambient light from the gala casting everything in shades of gold and shadow. Theodore finds her there because that's what diplomats do. They understand patterns. They anticipate movements. They know exactly where someone will go when they need to escape. Hazel is standing near the fountain, her dress catching the light in a way that suggests she's been moving through the estate for a while, trying to ground herself in the physical world after whatever happened in Henry's private chambers. Theodore keeps his distance, respects the space that a woman needs after claiming a king. But he doesn't leave. "You're going to face some serious resistance," he says, his voice carrying across the garden without raising above conversational volume. "The traditionalists in the pack won't accept this quietly." Hazel turns to look at him, and there's something different in her expression now. Something that's been sharpened by the intensity of Henry's attention, by the absolute certainty of his claim. She looks like someone who's been remade in the space of a few hours. "I know," she says simply. "Do you?" Theodore steps closer, but carefully, respectfully. "Because what you just did in that ballroom isn't just defiance. It's a revolution. You've announced publicly that a human woman can command the attention of the Lycan King. That changes the entire power structure." Hazel's expression hardens slightly. "Is that your way of saying I shouldn't have done it?" "No," Theodore says, and he means it. "It's my way of saying that you need to understand the cost. There will be council members who see you as a threat to the hierarchy. There will be traditionalists who view your relationship with Henry as corruption of pack bloodlines. There will be human government officials who see you as a security risk. The wind picks up, and Hazel's dress moves around her like water. Theodore notices that she doesn't look frightened by any of this. She looks determined. She looks like she's already calculated the cost and decided it's worth paying. Henry said something similar, she tells him. He said being with him isn't romantic, that it's going to test every boundary I think I have. Theodore nods slowly. He's not wrong, but there's something he hasn't told you yet, because he's still in the phase where he's trying to be gentle with you. The reality is that the opposition is going to escalate. They're going to test your commitment by making things harder for Henry. They might even try to weaponize your humanity against you. Poison, Hazel says quietly. And Theodore realizes she already knows. She's already thought 3 steps ahead. Eventually, he confirms. Probably not tonight, but soon enough that you need to be prepared. Hazel turns fully to face him, and the intensity in her gaze is unsettling. This is what happens when a human woman decides she's worth fighting for. She becomes observant in a way that predators recognize. "Why are you telling me this?" she asks. "What do you get out of it?" Theodore considers the question honestly. "I believe in what you're trying to do. I believe in the possibility of the worlds coexisting peacefully. And I believe that Henry is a better leader when he's not operating from a place of desperate fear." He pauses. "Also, I respect what you did to me on that dance floor. You used me to prove a point, and you did it with precision. That deserves recognition." Hazel's expression softens slightly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Theodore says. "When things get difficult, and they will, you're going to need allies who aren't emotionally invested in your survival. I'm offering to be that person." He extends his hand, and after a moment, Hazel takes it. The grip is firm, certain. The grip of someone who's just understood that surviving this world requires more than just the protection of a king. The ballroom doesn't react immediately. That's the first thing people misunderstand about power structures. They don't crumble with drama. They shift silently at first, almost imperceptibly, like tectonic plates grinding against each other beneath the surface before the earthquake registers. Kes watches the crowd from her position near the orchestra, and she can see it happening in real time. The micro-movements, the shifters pulling away from each other to form new groupings. The council members who've been standing against the east wall suddenly moving to the west, repositioning themselves in a way that suggests allegiance realignment. The human diplomats exchanging glances that carry the weight of 1,000 political calculations. It takes approximately 45 seconds after Henry and Hazel leave the ballroom for someone to actually voice what everyone's thinking. This is unacceptable. The voice comes from Marcus, who serves as Henry's deputy chancellor. He's older, mid-70s in human years, though shifter aging works differently. And he's been part of the power structure long enough to feel genuinely threatened by what just happened. A human woman in possession of the king's attention. It compromises judgment. It compromises the entire hierarchy. The words hang in the ballroom like smoke, and Kes feels her stomach clench. Because Marcus doesn't speak without purpose. Marcus speaks because he's testing something. Measuring response. Trying to determine if there's actually opposition to what Henry just did, or if it's just his own fear talking. The response comes faster than anyone expected. "With respect, Deputy Chancellor," Elise steps forward. And she's young, early 20s in human terms, which automatically makes her statement more dangerous, because nothing she says is bound by the weight of tradition. The king made his choice. His judgment isn't compromised. It's clarified. Marcus's expression darkens. She danced with another man, in front of all of us. The king's response was emotionally driven, not politically sound. The king's response was appropriate, another voice joins in, then another, and another, until suddenly there are shifters stepping forward, taking positions that clearly mark them as allied with what Henry just did. It's not a majority, not yet, but it's significant. It's the moment when the younger generation decides that maybe tradition doesn't matter as much as they've been taught it does. Theodore watches from the periphery, and he's cataloging every single person who speaks, filing them into mental categories. Allies, enemies, the undecided. It's the work of diplomacy, understanding the landscape, identifying the pressure points, determining where leverage can be applied. Kes moves toward the tension, positioning herself directly in the line of sight between Marcus and the growing cluster of Henry's supporters. She doesn't say anything. She just stands there, her presence a quiet statement about where her allegiance lies. This is a mistake, Marcus says, addressing the room now rather than any individual. One that will cost us. The pack cannot function if hierarchy is questioned at this level. The pack functions because the king leads, Elise counters, and her voice carries the absolute certainty of someone who's never learned to doubt. Not because we blindly follow. Henry made a choice. We respect that choice. The ballroom has become something else now. Not a gala, but a political arena. The music has stopped. The dancers have stilled. And in the spaces between conversations, in the careful positioning of bodies and the deliberate formation of alliances, the real power structure is being remade. Kess catches Theodore's eye across the room, and he nods slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. They're both thinking the same thing, that Hazel has just inherited a war by virtue of being chosen. That Henry's claim was a declaration, not just of love, but of willingness to reshape everything for her. The question now is whether she's ready for what comes next. Henry's chambers are silent, except for the sound of his breathing and the crackling of the fire. He's standing at the window now, his back to me, his shoulders bearing the weight of the evening in a way that makes him look suddenly mortal. The shirt he's wearing, the same tailored black one from the ballroom, is unbuttoned at the collar, and I can see the tension in his neck, the careful control he's maintaining even in private. "You need to understand what you've just agreed to," he says, not turning to look at me. His voice is different now, stripped of performance. This is what an alpha sounds like when he's finally allowed to stop leading and start being honest. The resistance isn't going to stop with Marcus. It's going to escalate. There will be council members who question my judgment. There will be traditionalists who see you as a threat to the bloodline purity they've spent centuries maintaining. I move closer to him, drawn by the vulnerability in his voice. The vulnerability is what makes him dangerous, I'm realizing. Not his strength, but the admission that he has weaknesses. I know, I tell him, because I do. Theodore made that clear in the gardens, and I've had enough experience with power structures to understand that breaking them requires sacrifice. Do you? Finally, he turns to face me, and the expression in his eyes is absolutely devastating. This is the king without his crown. This is Henry without the careful arrangement of authority. What I'm seeing is raw fear underneath all the certainty. Because I need to tell you something that's going to terrify you, something that's going to make you question whether this was worth it. He reaches for me, his hand settling on my jaw with that same careful reverence he's shown all night. But now I can feel him shaking beneath the touch, actually trembling like he's fighting something catastrophic inside his own body. The alpha part of me, he says slowly, the part that's been shaped by centuries of lineage and predatory instinct, doesn't think in terms of consent. It thinks in terms of ownership. It thinks in terms of marking territory and establishing dominance and ensuring that no other creature even considers approaching what belongs to it. His thumb traces my cheekbone, and his eyes are burning amber in the firelight. That part of me, he continues, wants to keep you in this room, wants to make sure you're never exposed to anyone else's attention, wants to consume you so completely that you can't imagine existing in a world that doesn't have me as its center. My heart is racing, but not from fear, from recognition, from understanding that what he's describing isn't cruelty, it's honesty about what drives him. But I've spent 300 years learning to be something other than that impulse, he says. Learning to think in terms of partnership instead of possession. Learning that true strength comes from allowing someone the freedom to choose you, not from forcing them to stay. He pulls me closer, his forehead against mine. "So here's the truth," he whispers. "Every single moment I'm with you, I'm fighting that instinct. Every time you look at another person, every time you express a desire that doesn't center on me, every time you assert your independence, I have to actively choose not to let the alpha consume the man." His grip tightens fractionally on my jaw. "And I will keep choosing," he says fiercely. "I will keep choosing to let you be free, because that's what love actually is. But I need you to understand that cost. I need you to know that you're asking me to be something that doesn't come naturally. You're asking me to be better than my nature." The fire crackles between us in the windows. And in the space between his vulnerability and my willingness to witness it, everything shifts again. The sounds from the ballroom below are filtering up through the stone walls now. Raised voices, the scrape of chairs, the unmistakable acoustic signature of a power structure beginning to fracture. Henry hears it before I do, his predator senses attuned to the frequencies that humans miss. His expression hardens as he processes what's happening below, and I watch the king reassert himself over the man, watch him start calculating responses and damage control and political maneuvers. No, I say, and it's surprising how clearly my voice cuts through his spiraling thoughts. Not right now. Not tonight. He looks at me like I've just asked him to do something impossible. They need you, he says, but there's no conviction behind it. There's only the weight of duty, the suffocating pressure of leadership that's been shaping his decisions for centuries. They can wait, I tell him, and I'm reaching for his hand before I've fully thought it through. Henry, right now, in this moment, I need you more than they do. Something in his expression shifts. The calculation fades, replaced by something rawer, something that looks dangerously close to the alpha predator he just confessed to fighting. Except, instead of possessiveness, it's protective. He's looking at me like I've just handed him permission to do something he's been terrified to attempt. Without another word, he pulls me toward the window. For a moment, I think he's going to open it, going to take me out into the night air. But instead, he reaches for a panel in the wall that I didn't even know existed. It slides open with barely a whisper of sound, revealing a narrow stone passageway that descends into darkness. Emergency exit, he murmurs against my hair. Built during the wars. No one's used it in over a century. He guides me into the passage, and the temperature drops immediately. The stone is cool beneath my palms as I reach out to steady myself, and the air tastes like ancient dust and secrets. Behind us, the sounds of the ballroom fade as we move deeper, Henry's hand never releasing its anchor around mine. The passage seems endless. Down and down, spiraling through the earth beneath the estate, until finally we emerge into a stone courtyard I've never seen before. It's beautiful in a desolate way. Fountains that haven't run in decades, archways carved with symbols that predate the current pack structure, benches built for creatures who needed more weight support than humans require. This is old, I breathe, looking around at the architecture. This is what the pack looked like before we learned to wear crowns, Henry says, and there's something almost reverent in his voice. This is what we were before we decided to be kings. He guides me to one of the ancient benches and sits, pulling me down beside him so I'm tucked against his side. His arm settles around my shoulders, and his breathing is finally starting to level out. The sounds of the gala above are completely gone now. We're suspended in a pocket of time that feels utterly removed from the chaos above. We can stay here until it settles, he says quietly. The council will manage. The traditionalists will spend the night consolidating their arguments. By morning, when we re-enter the world, we'll know exactly what we're facing. His free hand finds mine, and he laces our fingers together with surprising gentleness for someone whose entire nature is built on dominance. Right now, he whispers, I just want to be somewhere with you where no one else exists, where I'm not a king and you're not a revolution, where we're just two people trying to figure out how to build something that's never existed before. The ancient fountain beside us catches the faint moonlight filtering down from somewhere above. And in this forgotten place, beneath centuries of stone and expectation, we finally stop running. The silence doesn't last long enough. Henry's phone buzzes against the stone bench, and I watch him register the vibration before he even moves to check it. It's the kind of awareness that comes from centuries of power, the immediate recognition that something in the world above is demanding his attention. He pulls the device out with visible reluctance, his other arm still anchored around my shoulders, and his expression hardens as he reads whatever message has just arrived. Marcus is calling an emergency council session, he says quietly. They want to formally address what happened in the ballroom. I feel my stomach clench, but I keep my voice steady. How long before they escalate beyond words? Hours, Henry says, and the certainty in his voice is devastating. Maybe less. The traditionalists will push for a formal challenge to my leadership. They'll claim I'm compromised. They'll argue that my judgment about you, about us, has become a liability. He sets the phone down and pulls me closer, his forehead against the top of my head. The gesture is protective, but there's a desperation underneath it that I haven't heard before. This is a king recognizing that the thing he spent 3 years wanting is about to cost him everything he's built. We can leave, I tell him, surprising myself with the suggestion. We could go tonight, right now, disappear into the human world and let them sort out their politics without us. Henry pulls back enough to look at me, and the expression in his eyes is almost heartbreaking. You would do that? Give up your entire life for me? I'm asking if you would do it for us, I correct him gently. There's a difference. He's quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he's fighting with something inside himself. The firelight from the passageway above casts his features in sharp relief, and I can see the war happening behind his eyes, the conflict between the king who's bound by duty and the man who's terrified of losing me. I can't, he finally says, and the words taste like ash. Not yet. The pack is still organizing. If I disappear now, it looks like fear. It looks like I'm running. The traditionalists would use that as justification to declare me unfit. I reach up and touch his face, my palm against the sharp angle of his jaw. His eyes close at the contact, and I can feel him trembling slightly, not from cold, but from the effort of maintaining control when everything in him wants to break. Then we face them, I say simply. Together. His eyes snap open, and the intensity in that gaze is absolutely undeniable. Do you understand what that means? It means enduring council meetings where they question your presence. It means hearing people you'll never meet argue about whether you're worth the disruption. It means watching me have to defend you against creatures who've known me for centuries. I understand, I tell him. And I do. Theodore's warnings in the garden, Henry's confession about the alpha he's constantly fighting, the repositioning I watched happen in the ballroom. I understand all of it. I understand exactly what I'm choosing. And you're still choosing this? His hand moves to the back of my neck, fingers splaying through my hair. You're still choosing me? I'm choosing us, I clarify. And yes, I'm choosing that. The phone buzzes again, then again. The world above is demanding its king, and Henry knows it. But for one more moment, he stays here in this ancient place, holding me like I'm the only solid thing in a world that's about to become very complicated. Then we go face them, he finally says. Together. The phone stops buzzing eventually. Henry silences it without checking the notifications, and the gesture feels like defiance against the world that's waiting above us. But I can feel the weight of those unanswered calls pressing against him, a physical reminder that there's only so much time before we have to go back. I need to tell you something, he says quietly, and his voice carries the texture of someone who's been holding something back since the moment we met. Something that terrifies me more than any opposition the council could mount. I turn to face him fully, my body shifting so I'm looking directly into those burning amber eyes. Then tell me. His hand releases mine and he stands, moving toward the ancient fountain like the stillness is unbearable. The water hasn't flowed in decades, but he trails his fingers along the carved edges anyway, and I watch the corded muscle of his forearm shift beneath his skin. I'm afraid of what I could do to you, he finally says, and the admission seems to cost him something fundamental. Not intentionally, never intentionally. But there are moments when the alpha is close to the surface, when I'm holding you and feeling what you mean to me, when I'm terrified that one day the possession will override the restraint, that I'll hold you too tight, that I'll mark you in ways you can't take back, that I'll lose control of the thing I've spent 3 centuries learning to contain. He turns back to face me, and there's genuine fear in his expression. Not the controlled kind, but the raw animal kind. I've hurt people before, he continues, his voice rough. Not deliberately, but in moments where the alpha surged and the man couldn't hold it back. And the thought of that happening with you, of being the one who causes you pain, it's... He stops, unable to finish the sentence. I stand and move toward him, but I'm careful. I'm learning that with Henry, there's a language to movement, a way of approaching that either triggers his protective instinct or his predatory one. This time I'm moving slowly, deliberately, giving him time to register my approach as non-threatening. Listen to me, I say, when I'm close enough that he can feel my breath. You've had me in your arms multiple times tonight. You've held me with enough intensity that I can feel your heartbeat, smell your skin, feel the absolute power of your body against mine. And every single time, you've chosen restraint. You've chosen gentleness. You've chosen me over the impulse. His hands come up to my shoulders, and the touch is careful, always careful. But what if the next time I can't, he asks. And it's the question that's been eating him alive. What if one day the alpha decides that your safety is less important than the claim? What if I become the thing you're afraid of? Then we'll deal with it, I tell him simply. But you can't live in fear of something that hasn't happened. You can't punish yourself for possibilities that exist only in your head. I reach up and touch his face, my palm against his jaw, and I feel him lean into the contact like a creature starved of gentleness. His eyes close, and his breathing becomes slightly less ragged. I love you, I whisper, and I'm not going anywhere. Not because you're a king, not because you're powerful, but because you're terrified of your own power and you're choosing to control it anyway. That's what makes you worthy of being chosen. His arms come around me, and this embrace is different from the others. It's not possessive. It's desperate. It's a king finally admitting that he's terrified, and a woman refusing to let that terror be the thing that defines them. I love you too, he says against my hair. God help us both. I love you so much, it's destroying me. The stone passageway that led us down into the ancient courtyard has a visitor when we finally decide to return to the surface. Theodore is standing near the top of the stairs, silhouetted against the filtered light from Henry's chambers, and his expression carries the weight of information that isn't going to be pleasant to receive. Henry's entire body tenses the moment he recognizes the intrusion. His hand moves protectively to the small of my back, and I can feel him calculating threat levels, trying to determine whether Theodore's presence here is intentional or circumstantial. The answer comes when Theodore holds up both hands in a gesture of non-aggression. I didn't follow you, Theodore says before either of us can speak. But the council is making moves, real ones, not just posturing. Henry's jaw clenches, and the alpha that's been carefully contained for the past hour suddenly feels very close to the surface. How did you know where we were? I didn't, Theodore admits, moving down the stairs with deliberate slowness. But I knew you'd need to disappear, and I knew you'd take Hazel with you. So I waited in the passages. I've been studying the estate's architecture since I arrived, just in case. The words hang in the air, and I feel something shift in Henry's understanding. This isn't casual knowledge. This is preparation. This is someone who's been planning for a specific contingency. Why, I ask, because Theodore's motivations have never been entirely clear to me, and this level of preparation suggests something deeper than diplomatic courtesy. Theodore looks at me directly, and there's something vulnerable in his expression that I haven't seen before. Because I believe in what you're trying to do. Because I've been working toward human shifter integration for 15 years, and I've never seen anything with as much potential as what you two represent. And because, he pauses, seeming to gather himself. Because my sister died in a territorial dispute between Pax and humans 5 years ago. She was trapped between worlds, same as you are. If something like what you're building had existed then, she'd still be alive. The confession settles over us like snow, cold and transformative. Henry's protective instinct shifts slightly, recalibrating Theodore from potential threat to something more complicated. What exactly is happening upstairs, I ask, because the real information is buried beneath the emotion. Marcus is pushing for a formal challenge, Theodore says, and his voice becomes strictly informational. He's arguing that your relationship with Henry compromises Pax security. There's a faction gathering, maybe 30% of the council, who are willing to support a formal vote of no confidence. Henry makes a low sound in his throat, something that's barely human. That's never succeeded, not in 300 years. Because no previous king has given them this kind of ammunition, Theodore says, without malice, just fact. Your claim on Hazel is emotional, public. It breaks protocol in ways that traditionalists can point to and say it demonstrates instability. My hand finds Henry's, and I squeeze gently. What do they want? Theodore looks between us. They want you to step back from pack politics. They want guarantees that your human perspective won't influence Henry's decisions. They want assurances that the bloodline remains pure. None of which is possible, Henry says quietly. Because I won't ask her to diminish herself. Because her perspective makes me better. And because if bloodline purity is the price of peace, then peace isn't worth the cost. Theodore nods slowly, like he's been waiting to hear Henry say exactly that. Then we prepare for war. The oldest part of the archive is underground, carved directly into the stone that predates the current estate by centuries. Henry leads both of us there without explanation, moving through corridors with the certainty of someone who's walked them countless times before. Theodore follows without question, understanding intuitively that this detour isn't random. The library itself is vast, shelves carved into the stone walls, filled with documents that smell like centuries. Henry moves directly to a specific alcove, his fingers finding an ancient leather journal like it's the most natural thing in the world. When he opens it, the pages are almost translucent with age, written in a language that predates modern English by several hundred years. This was written by the first Lycan King, Henry says quietly, his voice careful. 300 years before I claimed the throne, before we had councils or hierarchies or any of the structures that define us now. He begins to read, translating the archaic language with the ease of someone who's spent lifetimes studying these words. His voice drops lower, and the rhythm of the ancient text carries something almost hypnotic. When the golden blood binds with the human soul, when predator learns to see prey as equal, when crown and choice become one, then shall the fractured worlds heal. But the cost is steep. The old must break, the certain must bend, and the one who bridges the divide shall carry the weight of transformation. Theodore moves closer to read over Henry's shoulder, and I can see the moment understanding dawns on his face. That's not metaphorical, he says quietly. That's a literal prophecy about human shifter integration. Written 300 years ago, Henry confirms, turning the page carefully. Before anyone seriously believed such a thing was possible. Before I was even born. He continues reading, and the words become increasingly specific. A prophecy about a woman who would walk between worlds without fear. About a king who would choose surrender over dominance. About a transformation that would ripple through both societies, reshaping power structures that had stood for millennia. There's more, Henry says, his amber eyes scanning the ancient text. There's a warning. The temperature in the archive seems to drop, and I feel Theodore's hand settle on my shoulder, a gesture of solidarity, of preparation for bad news. Henry reads slowly, translating each word with precision. The bridge between worlds shall be tested by fire. There shall come those who see salvation in the old ways, who would rather destroy than allow transformation. And the heart of this transformation, the one who binds the fractured, shall face the choice, preservation or evolution. To save one world, you may lose the other. To unite them, you must be willing to sacrifice everything you were. He closes the journal carefully, and when he looks at me, there's something ancient in his expression, something that carries the weight of 300 years of waiting for this moment. This prophecy has been hanging over the pack's head since the beginning, he says quietly. There have been scholars who've spent lifetimes trying to prevent it, traditionalists who've shaped every law and protocol specifically to stop a human and a shifter from bonding this way. Theodore's hand tightens on my shoulder. They don't know about this, do they? Marcus and the council, they're not fighting this because of politics. They're fighting because they've been trained for generations to stop exactly this. No, Henry confirms. Only the oldest bloodlines know about the prophecy. It's been kept secret because there was always a chance it would never happen, a chance we could outrun fate. He steps closer to me, his hand finding my jaw with that careful reverence. But fate apparently doesn't work that way. Henry sets the ancient journal down carefully on a stone table that's been weathered by centuries. His movements are deliberate, reverent, like he's handling something sacred. When he turns back to face me, there's a shift in his expression, something that looks like acceptance mixed with absolute determination. I spent 300 years trying to prevent this, he says quietly, his voice echoing slightly in the archive. Trying to be a king that the prophecy couldn't touch. trying to build a pack structure so rigid that fate itself would bend around it. Theodore steps back slightly, understanding intuitively that what's about to happen is between Henry and me. Henry crosses the space between us, and his movements are slow, measured. Everything about his body language screams control, the kind of control that comes from someone who's learned to contain catastrophic power. He takes my face in both hands, his palms settling gently against my cheeks, his thumbs tracing the line of my cheekbones with surprising tenderness. "I'm done running," he says, and there's absolute finality in those words. "I'm done trying to outrun what we're meant to be. So I'm making you a vow, right here, in this place that holds 300 years of my family's history." He lowers his forehead to mine, and his breathing becomes the only sound in the archive, except for the faint whisper of air through ancient stone. "I vow that I will never ask you to be less than you are," he continues, his voice rough with emotion. "I will never ask you to diminish your humanity to fit into a pack structure. I will never treat you as a weakness or a liability. And I will spend every single day for the rest of your life proving that choosing you was the best decision I've ever made." His hands move from my face to my shoulders, and he pulls me against his chest. His heartbeat is racing. I can feel it against my ear, and the vulnerability in that rapid rhythm is more intoxicating than any display of power could ever be. "The council is going to fight this," he whispers against my hair. "The traditionalists are going to use everything in their arsenal to separate us. There will be moments when it would be easier to let you go, to choose the pack over the prophecy, to choose safety over fate." He pulls back enough to look at me, and his amber eyes are burning with absolute certainty. "But I won't," he says fiercely. "I'm going to choose you, every single day, every single moment, even when it costs me everything. That's my vow." I reach up and touch his face, my palm against the sharp angle of his jaw, and I feel him lean into the contact like a creature finally allowed to show weakness. "I vow the same," I tell him, and the words carry the weight of their own prophecy. "I vow to stand with you, to learn your world without losing mine, to be the bridge you need me to be, even when it breaks me." His hand finds the back of my neck, fingers splaying through my hair, and he pulls me close. The kiss is different from the others. Slower, deeper, more intentional. It's not a claim or a declaration. It's a promise. It's a vow made flesh and breath, and the absolute certainty that we're about to reshape everything we know. When he finally releases me, his forehead stays against mine. "Then we go back," he says quietly. "We go back and we face whatever comes next. Together." Theodore clears his throat softly, reminding us that we're not actually alone. "The council is waiting," he says gently. "They've called an emergency session." Henry nods slowly, releasing me reluctantly. But his hand never leaves the small of my back as we move toward the passage that will lead us back to the world above. The ballroom has transformed into a council chamber in the hours we were gone. The orchestra has been cleared away, the dancing floor is now lined with seats arranged in a semicircle, and at least 100 shifters are gathered, council members, territorial leaders, witnesses to what's about to happen. The energy in the room is barely contained, electricity waiting for a spark. Henry enters first, and the room responds immediately. Bodies stiffen. Attention snaps toward him like gravity realigning. But when I step through the doorway behind him, when I appear at his side in a deliberate positioning that's equal rather than subordinate, the silence becomes something else entirely. It becomes the silence of people watching the world reorganize itself in real time. Marcus rises from his seat at the center of the semicircle. His expression is carefully neutral, but I can see the calculation happening behind his eyes. He's reassessing, trying to determine if our public reentry changes the equation or simply confirms what he already believed. "Your Majesty," Marcus begins, his voice carrying the formal weight of protocol. "The council has gathered to formally address the events of this evening. Your public claim on a human woman during a diplomatic gala represents a significant departure from established pack precedent. We require clarification on whether this was an emotional impulse or a deliberate political statement." Henry doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he reaches back and finds my hand, lacing our fingers together before pulling me forward so I'm standing beside him rather than behind him. The gesture is small, but it's everything. It's a statement about positioning, about hierarchy, about the role I'm about to claim.
It was both, Henry says quietly, his voice carrying easily through the ballroom despite the absence of artificial amplification. It was emotional because I love her, and it was political because I'm announcing that the pack's future will be shaped by human-shifter partnership rather than pure bloodline dominance. Marcus's expression hardened slightly. That represents a fundamental break from everything this pack has built. Yes, Henry agrees, and there's no apology in his voice. It does, intentionally. He turns to face me fully, and his hand releases mine only to settle on the small of my back. The touch is proprietary, but it's not possessive. There's a difference I'm finally understanding. Proprietary means claiming responsibility. Possessive means refusing to release. I need you to understand what you're choosing, he says to me, his amber eyes burning in the ballroom light. Once you make this public, there's no going back. The council will test you. The traditionalists will try to exploit you. There will be nights when you question whether being with me is worth the cost. I reach up and touch his face, my palm against his jaw, and I feel the entire ballroom holding its breath. I'm choosing you, I say clearly, making sure every single person in this room hears the words. I'm choosing you as an equal, as a partner who loves you enough to stand here and say it. Henry's expression softens in a way that contradicts the raw power radiating from his body. His hand moves to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, and the gesture is so gentle that it almost breaks me. Even when I'm impossible, he whispers, though the acoustics of the ballroom carry the words to everyone. Especially when you're impossible, I tell him, and I smile slightly. That's when you need me most. He pulls me close, and this kiss is different from every other one. It's not a claim or a demonstration. It's a choice being made public. It's two people deciding that love is worth whatever comes next. The ballroom erupts. Some applause, some outrage, some stunned silence. But Henry and I don't break apart. We're too busy learning what it feels like to choose each other in front of the entire world. The challenger's name is Theron, and he steps forward from the traditionalist faction with the confidence of someone who's convinced himself he's acting in the pack's best interest. He's tall, shifters tend to be, with the kind of build that suggests generations of pure bloodline and the pride that comes with it. His eyes are dark, not amber, which means he's still in human form, still in control, still dangerous in a calculated way, rather than the catastrophic way that defines Henry. Your Majesty, Theron says, and there's respect in the title, but defiance in the tone. I challenge your fitness to lead. A king who allows his judgment to be compromised by emotional attachment is a king who's failed his primary duty, the protection of the pack's bloodline integrity. The ballroom goes absolutely silent. This isn't theater anymore. This is formal challenge, and everyone in the room understands the gravity of what's just happened. Challenge protocols are ancient, primal. They exist outside the modern council structure, reaching back to the days when pack leadership was determined by raw strength rather than political acumen. Henry's entire body tenses beside me. His hand, which has been settled possessively on the small of my back, suddenly feels like iron. I can feel his heart rate accelerate, feel the shift happening beneath his skin as the alpha recognizes threat. His amber eyes start to glow. Not just the predatory amber I've seen before, but something more dangerous. Something that looks like it might consume him entirely. But he doesn't move. He doesn't shift. He doesn't respond with the visceral dominance that Theron is clearly expecting. Instead, Henry steps forward, his movements deliberate and controlled, despite the power radiating from him in waves. When he speaks, his voice is quiet enough that you'd think he's being gentle, except the gentleness is the most terrifying thing about it. This is a king choosing restraint, which is infinitely more devastating than a king choosing violence. No, he says simply. Theron blinks, clearly confused by the response. Your Majesty, under challenge protocols, I said no, Henry repeats, cutting him off without raising his voice. I'm not engaging with your challenge. I'm not defending my position. I'm not proving anything to you. He turns back to face me, and his expression is absolutely devastating. The intensity in those glowing amber eyes is so complete that it feels like the rest of the ballroom fades away. There's only him and me and the absolute certainty radiating from his body.
Hazel is not a test of my strength, he says, and his voice carries through the ballroom like thunder. She's a reflection of it. She's proof that I'm strong enough to choose partnership over dominance, strong enough to share power instead of hoarding it, strong enough to love something more than myself. He reaches for me, and his hand settles on my jaw, gentle, reverent, undeniably possessive in its protectiveness. Any of you who can't accept that, he says to the entire room, without breaking eye contact with me, are free to leave the pack. Find another territory. Find another king who'll let you hide in the old ways. But if you stay, you accept that the future looks different. That strength isn't about bloodline purity anymore. It's about the courage to transform. Theron takes a step back, clearly understanding that he's miscalculated catastrophically. The challenge has been rejected, which, within pack hierarchy, means it was never a legitimate threat in the first place. Henry pulls me close, his forehead touching mine, and I can feel him shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of maintaining control when everything in him wants to break. That was incredible, I whisper. That was terrifying, he corrects me. That was choosing you in front of everyone who thinks I'm insane for doing it. The ballroom is electric, in a way that has nothing to do with celebration. It's the electricity of power realigning, of certainties shattering, of a world that suddenly looks different than it did 30 seconds ago. Theron retreats into the crowd without another word, and I can feel the traditionalist faction fragmenting around him. Some stay silent, clearly calculating whether their opposition is worth the consequences. Others actually move away from that section of the room, repositioning themselves in smaller clusters that look less organized, but somehow more genuine. Marcus remains seated at his position in the council semicircle, and his expression has transformed into something I can't quite read. It's not defeat, exactly. It's recalibration. A man realizing that his chess pieces are positioned wrong, and the board is no longer the game he thought he was playing. Kes rushes toward us through the crowd, her face flushed with something that looks dangerously close to vindication. She's grinning in a way that suggests she's been waiting for this exact moment since the beginning of the night. "I told you," she practically shouts, throwing her arms around me in a hug that nearly knocks me sideways. "I told you he would lose his mind if you dance with someone else. I told you the whole pack would reorganize itself around it." Henry's hand doesn't leave the small of my back, but there's less tension in his shoulders now. The immediate danger has passed. The challenge has been rejected. The king has declared his position unambiguously. Theodore appears at my other side, and his expression carries the weight of someone who's just watched geopolitics shift beneath his feet. "That was either the smartest or most dangerous thing I've ever seen," he says quietly. Henry rejecting the challenge, choosing love over combat protocol, it's going to ripple through both our worlds. "Good," I say, and I'm surprised by how steady my voice sounds when my insides are still shaking. The worlds need to shift. The crowd is starting to normalize slightly. Some shifters are leaving, those who couldn't stomach what they just witnessed. Others are clustering in new configurations, and I can almost see the political landscape reorganizing itself in real time. The younger generation looks energized. The oldest bloodlines look stunned. The middle ground is still processing. A woman approaches us, older, with silver threading through her dark hair, and the bearing of someone who spent decades in power. She extends her hand to me, and I notice her claws are just slightly visible. A subtle reminder that even the polite ones carry predatory potential beneath the surface. "I'm Catherine," she says, and her voice carries the weight of genuine authority, rather than performative dominance. "I represent the Eastern Territories. I wanted to say that what your king just did, choosing principle over protocol, partnership over possession, that's exactly what the pack needs to hear right now." I shake her hand carefully, aware that this moment is being witnessed, cataloged, added to the narrative of who I am and what I represent. "Thank you," I tell her, and I mean it. It means a lot, especially from someone with your standing. She nods, and before she leaves, she catches Henry's eye. "You're going to face significant opposition," she says to him. "But you're also going to find unexpected allies. The future is messier than the past, Your Majesty. But it's also more honest." Henry inclines his head in acknowledgement, and when Catherine walks away, it feels like a turning point. Not a resolution, this is far from over, but a moment where the possibility of success suddenly becomes visible. Henry's hand tightens on my back, pulling me slightly closer. His forehead drops to my shoulder, and his breathing is finally starting to normalize. The crisis has passed. The declaration has been made. Now comes the harder part, living with the consequences. The weeks that follow the gala settle into a rhythm that neither of us could have predicted. There's no fanfare, no coronation, no formal ceremony declaring me anything official. It's quieter than that. It's the slow, deliberate work of becoming something new, while the world around us adjusts to what we've already decided we are. Henry's chambers become a kind of headquarters for what people are starting to call the Integration Initiative. It's not my official title. I don't have an official title, which was a deliberate choice on Henry's part. He wanted to avoid any implication that my role was derived from his authority rather than rooted in my own competence. So instead of being crowned, I'm simply present, consistently, unapologetically. At council meetings, at territorial disputes, at the negotiations between pack leadership and human government officials. The younger shifters are the first to accept the shift. There's something about seeing their alpha freely admit that partnership doesn't diminish strength, it amplifies it. A girl no more than 18 approaches me one afternoon in the gardens surrounding the estate. She's nervous, her hands clasped tightly enough that her claws are visible beneath the skin, but her voice is steady. "I wanted to thank you," she says, and there's genuine gratitude in her expression. "My mother always told me I had to choose between the pack and my own ambitions. But watching you refuse that choice, watching you say that you could be both, it changed something for me." I reach out and gently touch her shoulder, careful not to trigger any predatory instinct. "What did it change?" "It made me believe that I could be a leader too," she says. "Not because I'm strong, but because I'm willing to think differently." That conversation repeats in different variations throughout the following weeks. A human diplomat asks me for advice on navigating pack politics without losing her humanity. A young shifter male asks if there's a way to pursue a career outside territorial conflict without being seen as weak. An elder woman pulls me aside to confess that watching Henry choose love has made her reconsider everything she's believed about power. The resistance doesn't disappear entirely. Marcus remains on the council, and he still carries the weight of his opposition like a badge. But without Theron's vocal support, and with younger council members increasingly siding with the integration model, his power is fractured into something manageable, rather than threatening. Henry notices the shift in my confidence. One evening, we're in his study, papers scattered across the massive oak desk, the remnants of a council meeting still hanging in the air, and he watches me with that intense, calculating gaze that suggests he's trying to solve a puzzle written in my body language. "You're different," he says, and there's no judgment in his voice, only observation. "How so?" I ask, though I already know. I can feel it in the way I move through the pack territories now. There's no more hesitation, no more questioning whether I belong. "You're not fighting anymore," he says quietly. "You're building." He stands and moves around the desk, his hand finding the small of my back with that now familiar gesture of protectiveness. His forehead drops to my shoulder, and I can feel him breathing me in, a distinctly shifter behavior that still sends heat through my body. "I'm so proud of you," he whispers against my skin. "Not because you're with me, but because you're becoming exactly what the pack needs." I turn to face him fully, my hands settling on his shoulders. His shirt is unbuttoned at the collar, and I can see the curve of muscle where his neck meets his collarbone. The proximity still makes my heart race, still makes my breath catch slightly. "We're doing this together," I remind him. "That's the whole point." "I know," he says, pulling me closer. "That's what terrifies me most, knowing I could lose you." But even as he says it, I can feel him learning to hold that fear without letting it control him. Morning arrives quietly, the kind that filters in through stone walls and finds you before you're ready to be found. I wake in Henry's bed, an ancient four-poster that's probably older than most countries, with his arms still anchored around my waist. He's awake already. I can tell by the way his breathing has that deliberate quality of someone pretending to sleep. His forehead is against the back of my neck, and the warmth of his body is the only thing keeping me tethered to this moment. "You're thinking too loud," I murmur, not bothering to turn around. "I can hear it from here." Henry makes a sound that's somewhere between a laugh and a groan. His arm tightens slightly, not aggressively, but with that protective weight I've learned to recognize. "I'm trying to memorize this," he says quietly, "this exact moment, before everything becomes complicated again." "It's already complicated," I point out. but I lean back into him anyway. His hand moves from my waist to my shoulder, fingers splaying across my collarbone. The touch is possessive, but it's also tender, which I'm learning are not mutually exclusive things with Henry. I know, he says, and his voice carries the texture of someone who hasn't slept. But right now, in this room, it's just us. No council, no traditionalists, no prophecies written 300 years ago. Just you and me, and the fact that I'm terrified I'm going to wake up and you'll be gone. I turn to face him fully, and the morning light catching in his amber eyes is almost heartbreaking in its intensity. His dark hair is rumpled, and there's a vulnerability in his expression that contradicts everything the pack sees when they look at him. This is the man beneath the crown. This is Henry, stripped of everything except his desperate need not to lose me. I'm not going anywhere, I tell him, reaching up to touch his face. My palm settles against the sharp angle of his jaw, and I feel him lean into the contact. Not last night, not this morning, not ever. He pulls me closer, close enough that his heartbeat becomes my heartbeat, close enough that the boundary between us blurs into something neither of us can quite define. His hand moves to the back of my neck, fingers threading through my hair with surprising gentleness. The council's going to push back, he says against my hair, harder than before. They're going to present formal objections to my continued leadership. They're going to question your place in pack politics. They're going to try every tactic they can think of to prove that choosing you was a mistake. I know, I say quietly. And we're going to face it, together. He pulls back enough to look at me directly, and the expression in his eyes is absolutely undeniable. This is a king who surrendered everything, his certainty, his control, his carefully constructed walls, to a woman who came to a gala specifically to defy him. I love you, he says, and the words carry the weight of 300 years of waiting. I've loved you since the moment you looked at me without fear, and I'm going to keep loving you even when it costs me everything. A knock at the door interrupts whatever I was about to say. Henry's entire body tenses, the alpha responding to the intrusion with immediate protectiveness. He doesn't move away from me, but I feel him shift into a more neutral position, still intimate, but with enough separation that we're not completely entangled when whoever's on the other side enters. It's Kes. She's holding a breakfast tray and wearing an expression that suggests she's been waiting outside this door for hours. The council is requesting your presence at a formal session, she says, not bothering with preamble. They want to formally address the integration initiative and its implications for pack structure. Henry and I exchange a look. This is it. The moment where we stop hiding and step back into the world that's waiting to test us. Tell them we'll be there, Henry says, and his voice has already shifted into command. The vulnerability fades, replaced by the careful control of a king about to face his greatest challenge. But before Kes leaves, Henry reaches over and squeezes my hand. The gesture is small, but it's everything. It's a reminder that underneath the crown, he's still terrified. The ballroom where this all began is different now. The decorations from the gala are long gone, replaced by something more functional, a council chamber, a meeting space where the future is being negotiated in real time. Henry stands at the center of the semicircle, and I stand beside him, not behind him, exactly as I did the night everything changed. The council votes. Not unanimously. Marcus abstains and 3 traditionalists vote against. But the integration initiative passes with a clear majority. It's not a complete victory. It's a beginning. Messy, complicated, uncertain. After the session ends, after the council members file out and we're alone in the empty ballroom, Henry finds my hand. We did it, he says, but his voice carries a question rather than certainty. We started something, I correct him gently. The real work is just beginning. He pulls me closer. For a moment, we're back to that first night. Except now we're not defying each other. We're building together. The door closes behind us as we leave. Outside, the pack is waiting. Outside, the human world is watching. Outside, history is being written by 2 people who chose love over everything else. The question isn't whether it will work. The question is what we're willing to sacrifice to find out. And that's the only answer that matters.